Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Surfside Recovery Podcast. My name is Brian Licata, and we just wanted to let you guys know that if you or anyone is struggling with addiction, to please reach out to Surfside. You can give us a call at 609-709-4205 or visit us at surfside.org and all of our social media platforms. Hello, everyone, and good morning. Welcome back to another edition of the Surfside Recovery Podcast. My name is Brian Licata, alongside the wonderful Alyssa Fountain. Thank you for joining us this morning. I heard that you were notified that you were on the podcast about, 15 minutes ago?
Like 18 minutes ago.
Okay, that sounds pretty much just about right for how we do things here. Ian actually called me at 5 yesterday, and I was in the grocery store. He's like, hey, we got to do a podcast. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's the weekend. So, yeah, we probably should do one. So thanks for pinch hitting for us, Alyssa.
Of course.
So, I don't know if everyone knows the big news, but would you like to tell everyone what your new role is here?
Sure. Yeah. So I officially am a Surfside employee, and I, as of Monday, so like 6 days ago, I'm the director of growth and engagement. So that's Surfside, it's Saltwater, it's everything.
Very, very exciting. Very, very exciting. So how's the first week been so far? So when was it official?
Monday. So this was my first week. It was good. Ian is someone who, like, I know very well.
I should hope so.
So, I've seen like the back operations of everything that he's done. So like before Surfside, he had a really small kiteboarding company that became a pretty, I wouldn't say big, but a pretty medium kiteboarding company. I've always known how Ian gets things done. So for a long time, I've been like, yeah, maybe we'll work together, but I don't know if now's the time. And then a couple weeks ago, we were just sort of like having a conversation that's like, if this really is a pandemic and the end of the world and everything that we've been talking about, like, are we like full force going forward the way that we want to, and it felt like it was strangely the perfect time to get on board.
So that's kind of how it kind of came about. Like, did you feel like, I don't know, I guess you wanted like more or something like that? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
So we were talking about Saltwater, which is I feel like you guys have had conversations about Saltwater, but, we were having conversations about Saltwater and being not really a recovery oriented. Look, there's the man himself and the dogs that will follow.
Wilma. She's my favorite.
She's a very good dog. A little strange. She's a strange dog, but a good dog. So we were having conversations about Saltwater being, this like supportive, like a space that's supportive for people in recovery, right? Because like those who do any sort of sport that's kind of humbling, where it's like you can be really good at it, but you can also be really terrible first. We were having conversations about how like those who are in recovery can find that to be like a really, really comforting space, but it's also a really comforting space for people who are not in recovery. So there's these like really far ends of the spectrum of like people who are really hard drinkers who like to work out, and then people who are in recovery who like to work out. And sometimes they're like, do you mix them, but like, where's the space in between? So I had been like, we should make this a recovery gym. And I spoke with someone who kind of painted the picture for like, we don't always know that we're an example of recovery to people, right? And there's someone who I met who is in the rooms now who knew nothing about recovery, and one day asked, if I could introduce her to a supportive group of people who just don't drink. And I was like so surprised that she didn't know that that probably meant that she belonged in like some sort of recovery fellowship, right? But like she didn't know what she didn't know.
Yeah.
And she was seeing people show up to the gym who didn't drink and had really fulfilling lives. So this is my really long way of answering that. We started talking about Saltwater being this recovery, like supportive recovery community, but it's not specific to people who are in recovery from substance use, because there's a whole bunch of people who would find like CrossFit and that like sense of overcoming in these like short workouts and that really intensive community. Like there are people who are recovering from a whole bunch of stuff that would benefit from that. And why exclude them? You know, why not make this like just a really inclusive space that's kind of focused on mental health and wellness and overall well-being? So once we started talking about that, it was like, it kind of felt like I was getting excited for a project that someone else got to work on. And finally, I was just like,
how to get your hands in there.
Yeah, and I said to Ian, you know, like, we've like taken a lot of risks, you know, for Surfside. He quit like a super stable job. And I was sort of like, when do you think I take the risk? You know,
Right.
and that was like, it's Ian. So he basically was like, let's write a proposal and then let's do it. And so we did. Yeah. And I mean, it was interesting because, you know, Molly, who was on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, who I actually don't know well at all. I just know people who know her well. I called her because she works with her spouse, and she asked why I wouldn't. And I was like, oh, well, you know, and I like rattled off all these fears. And she basically was like, you know, you're a woman in recovery. Why are you operating from a place of fear?
Yeah.
Like,
Molly just dropping some shit on
just
you.
like dropped it and then was like, okay, you have a great weekend. Nice to.
Oh, it's fantastic. A couple things you said kind of reminded me of something. It was interesting that you said like, you know, sometimes you don't realize that you're like an example of like someone in recovery. At the place I work at now, the only person who really knows like my backstory is my boss, who's a friend of mine from like middle school. And then one of the other guys I work with, you know, there's another guy I work with who's actually in recovery. And then another guy I work with has a relative who's like kind of struggling. And he's just like, you know, just like a side conversation, like, you know, mentioning it to me or whatever. We're just kind of like getting to know each other. And then like I started, you know, like saying some stuff to him. And he's like, oh yeah, you know, it kind of makes sense. So it's like, you never really know when you're going to be in the position where you can like kind of talk about it. And I didn't, you know, I didn't like tell him what my whole like backstory was, but I still kind of offered, you know, I don't really know if advice is the right word, but maybe, you know, someone who knows a little bit more, I could kind of like explain it to him or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to, like when I worked in the casinos, I was so like intensely private about my recovery, because I used to always think like, what's a long time for me is not actually a long time for other people to like be without. And I was always,
I didn't know you worked in the casino business.
Oh yeah, I worked in slots.
Really? Like, did you repair them, or were you like a
like
pit boss?
paying jackpots? I mean, we like would repair to a point, and then we would have to call someone who actually knew what they were doing. But like, we would open it up and turn it off and on again.
Right.
And that fixes like 90% of the problems. Put your tickets in so you can print them out. It was actually probably when I worked at Harrah's, that was like the job was really overwhelming, but those were like the most fun coworkers that I worked with. But I used to be so convinced that like, if anybody, you know, I would be like operating on someone's preconceived notion of what that looked like was, you know? Right. So like if I said I was in recovery, then it was kind of like an open-ended sentence for you to fill in the rest. So
yeah, as soon as you mentioned the word heroin or crack, people were like, ooh. Oh.
They're like,
wait, what?
Sorry, come again? Yeah, so but working at Harrah's was so fun, except that every now and then like the power would go out for like a split second, which shuts off every single slot machine on the floor and starts it all over again. And I mean, it's a computer, so it like picks up right where it left off. But when 3,500 slot machines shut off on a Friday night while everyone's drinking, it's like
they're not happy about it.
There would be moments where I'd be like, should I just go home and never come back?
So I want to ask you a little bit about your experience in the recovery, like in the workplace world. So you went from working at Harris. Where did you go? How did you end up now working
So
for Surfside?
I worked at Harris, and it's very interesting because I have this I have like a record of becoming convinced that I'm going to get laid off with absolutely no evidence. So
Okay.
while there was like no evidence that I was going to get laid off at Harris, but I became convinced that I was like the next round of people to get laid off.
Right.
So I saw that there was an opening at Borgata for a slot supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
I went over there for about a year. Great. I mean, Borgata's got like a really good work culture.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was there, Ian opened Surfside and kind of had no idea what he was doing. So I was like on the side doing his marketing. Well, I think, people don't necessarily know what goes into like building something, right?
Yep.
So you like see other people do it. You think, I've got this really good thing, I'm just going to open and people are going to want to send folks here.
Right.
But you have to like educate people on what that program is. So he started to like accidentally double book himself and would sometimes send me to go to meetings for Surfside. So he'd sent me to a meeting with Recovery Centers of America, and I had no idea who the lady was that I was working with, who I was meeting with, and she wound up being like a big director, and then their director or regional director of marketing came and met us for lunch, and we spoke for a really long time. And RCA basically needed like someone to cover the small area around the lighthouse in Atlanta County. So I was only going to be covering like this tiny portion of South Jersey, and they hired me. And I was super excited. I didn't know what marketing was. I kind of didn't know anything. We used to have these brochures that said that we were the finest drug and alcohol addiction treatment program in the world. And I would like take them out and people would be like, oh, wow, that's a really bold statement. I was quite a ditz. I might still be, but it was really at first. And like the first marketing thing that I ever went to for Ian, we went to this facility that like the parking lot was on a hill and kind of on an angle. And I got there by myself. And as I got out of the car, I was like holding a box of donuts, which was like really important to me. And then Ian's brochures. And I like got out of my car and tripped and dropped, like in this split second had to decide, like, do I hold the donuts? Do I hold the brochures? So I dropped the brochures.
Kept
and
the
they
donuts.
like slid underneath the car as the person I was meeting came and pulled up next to me. So then I was like, I can't lay next to my car and get these brochures out.
Right.
So of course, like the guy takes me inside and he's like, okay, and why don't you give me some of Surfside literature? And I was like, here's the thing. It's actually under my car in the parking lot.
Oh boy.
So, I mean, how people hired me at the beginning is a bit shocking, but from RCA, like my territory expanded. I wound up, being there for, I think like 2 years. And then eventually transitioned to a small program called Serenity at Summit, which was about 4 months later merged with a larger company named Delphi. And I worked at Delphi for like the past 2.5 years or so. And, Delphi was like, they were really good to me. They taught me. They are a company that like uses data to like make decisions, and which is really helpful, especially like when you're in a field that has so much to do with like feeling and emotion. Sometimes it's actually really nice to just have like some real data to work
concrete stuff to go off of. Yep.
Yeah, and they were like really invested in training us, and so they about a year ago they put me in like an interim manager role, and then I became the regional manager for New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. And I mean, it was just a really cool job. And it made it so that like, as Ian and I started to have these conversations, you know, like I was working for this woman who like I actually felt was a really good mentor to me, you know? And it's weird when like you want to follow your heart, but you're also like, but I really like my boss, you
Yep.
know?
Yeah, I've been in situations like that too. You almost feel like you kind of owe the place you're working at something,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
So, I mean, they were really understanding, you know? Like I think that when people see what's going on at Surfside and especially like building out Saltwater, everybody gets it.
So yeah, what is it? What is the process of building out a gym been like? When Ian told me that you know he was starting to do this thing at the gym, I'm like, you just can't stop from adding more things to your plate.
I partially want to show you what his office looks like because you
Uh,
know you
it's
used to
been on the
watch
show.
that.
It's been on the office has been on the show before. Like the
Oh yeah,
boxes just
well,
stacked up to
stacked
the
up to
ceiling.
the ceiling, and now it's like coming wider. Um,
Every time he tells me he's doing something else, I'm like, dude, you just you just can't stop just from adding stuff to your
so
plate you don't need to
right.
do.
So building the gym's been interesting. You know, like with the space that we're going to be in, I think is really cool. It's like right across from the crack. Did you see it? It's like right across from the crack.
Yeah. Oh, I know where it's at. I haven't seen it yet, but I drive by it every morning on my way to
Yeah. So
work.
some of it is like just talking to people and finding out like what is it that they really have liked about experiences in the past and what haven't they liked. And you know, you can't necessarily meet everybody's needs all at once, but
Hmm.
kind of knowing like there was a gym that was in this area for a long time that closed, and you know, its members sort of like split, but they were all really committed to like the way that that program looked. So kind of getting to know them and figuring out what's been missing in your training routine,
Hmm.
and then talking to people who it's actually really funny. I might get in trouble for saying this, but like I had thought maybe we should get some women specific programming, um, you know, so that like women maybe don't feel like, because I was super self-conscious when I first went to CrossFit. Like I was
Right.
really concerned that like people were looking at me and people thought I was stupid, and um I'm like that all the time, super self-centered. So I was talking to this woman I'm friends with who's a psychiatrist and lives in Ocean City. And I was like, yeah, I think we're going to do this women specific programming. And she was like, I'm not going to lie to you. Part of the appeal is a bunch of shirtless men running around. So we don't have to get crazy. So, um, you know, whatever, just like chatting with people, figuring out what their needs are so that we can build out programming. Um, like a lot of what we want to do is like talk to small businesses and larger businesses and let them know like we can accommodate like an employee rate,
Right.
setting up some cool incentives for our members, so discounts with a couple apparel companies, um, weightlifting gear, you know,
Yeah.
weightlifting belts,
Gloves,
all that good
shirts,
stuff.
belts, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Exactly.
Very cool. Very cool. So when's you know, last time we did a podcast, Ian was saying that, you know, hoping like July 1st, maybe August 1st. Is there any updates on the timeline on that?
I think we'll be good to go for July 1st.
It's like not that long from now.
I know.
It's like 2 weeks.
It is like 2 weeks.
Oh
Yeah, what's
man.
today's date? I think it's
Today's the 14th.
14th.
Yeah, today's the 14th. Well, this has been awesome. Do you have anything else you'd like to you know, add to the conversation before we wrap it up for the morning?
Mm, not really. The one thing that I'll say, um, like when I told people, I feel like this is important to say, that when
Mm.
I started talking to people about leaving, and then like I kind of announced to the world that I was leaving, a bunch of people were like, boy, I wish that, you know, like I could just follow my heart like that. And I wish that I could just, like take a leap of faith. And I feel like it's very important to say that like what people choose to post on social media and choose to talk about is like very sometimes a, a piece of the truth, but it's only a piece of the truth. It's like
Hmm.
only the snapshot that you get to see. And like the reality is that for years, Ian and I have like set up our life so that eventually one day we would be able to do this. But
Hmm.
like for those who don't know, owning your own company or running your own company looks a lot like working 90 hours a week and getting phone calls in the middle of the night that then make you panic every time your phone rings in the middle of the night. Like, it was funny, like some of the responses that I got from people, I was like, oh, this is like kind of terrifying. It sounds really freeing, but it's also, a terrifying leap. That is less terrifying because of our ability to like intensely plan. And quite honestly, like what I said to Ian when we were having this conversation was like, I know all these people who have made like the most careful plans for the future, and then COVID-19 became a reality, and like it didn't matter what you planned for because nobody planned for a pandemic.
Right.
So in the grand scheme of things, like, what do we have to lose? But also this wasn't like we woke up. It wasn't really like we woke up 3 weeks ago and just were like, let's go.
Yeah, I'll just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing ever works like that. I mean, I can speak from my own experience. Like, I had a lot of stuff like planned out, and it didn't really, especially with the, coronavirus, it didn't go really exactly at all how I wanted it to. But, as long as you can like adapt and move things around, like it'll work out,
That's it. That's all I needed to contribute.
All right. Well, thanks for doing the podcast. Hopefully we'll get you on another time with more than 18 minutes notice. But thanks for joining the show. Everyone, please stay tuned to the Surfside Recovery Podcast. We'll be back next week with somebody on the show. And stay tuned for more information about saltwater athletics. If you haven't followed, there's a Facebook and an Instagram now, I assume. So you can check that out, saltwaterathletics.org. Yes, you can find that all membership information, photos, videos to come, and all those sort of things. So until next week, thank you very much. Alyssa, thank you, and adios.
Goodbye.
As always, if you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out to Surfside. You can give us a call at 609-709-4205 or get us on the web at surfside.org.